Hello and welcome to the DPC Show. My name is Dan Offen, aka Mr. Big Jams. In this show, I'm going to be taking you through all 6 of the DPC regions, helped by 6 of the world's top analysts who'll be giving you in-depth information about the goings-on every single week. Sorry about the late release of this episode. I was pretty sick overnight and struggled to get up early enough to record, and then when I did get up, I was in no fit state to be recording, which means that the first 3 regions of this week are recorded with me fully conscient, and the last 3 are recorded with me feeling as I do now, which is more than a little bit under the weather. So sorry if my dopey questions are not ideal this week. I will be back to normal service next week. But anyway, enough of that. We're going to be moving on to our first region pretty quickly. But before then, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Danny Loffen, and that's spelled Daniel, then O-F-F-E-N. And if you would like to financially support me for creating this show, you can find a link to my Patreon in the episode description. And I do appreciate whatever support I get there. But we're going to be kicking off straight away with CIS, where Mo Farah is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Wonderful. Okay, so to kick off, talk me through what you see as the top game of the region this week.
The top game of the region? Oh, it's a good question. I would say probably Live to Win versus Empire, but that's only because I feel, honestly, it was like the best of the bad bunch this week. There was like 2 series where VP just destroyed people in Extremum and Unique. And then the Na'Vi Empire series was, although game 1 was 65 minutes, it was never really out of Na'Vi's favor. They were always in the driving seat. And maybe you could say Team Spirit versus Live to Win was a pretty good series as well. But again, I feel like it was not through like really good play or anything, though. It was kind of like people just making a lot of mistakes and drafting errors and things. So not an amazing week. I feel like I'm not selling CIS very well already, but there'll be better weeks, I think, in general.
Every region's got to have a dud week.
Yeah.
Let's start this dud week then by talking about that Live to Win series and also their later series against Team Spirit. They're a team before that we said we're kind of a middle team. We're not sure exactly where they're going to end up, and they have won 1 series this week and lost 1 series, so perhaps they're still a middle team. What are your feelings about them this week?
So I feel like Live to Win, sometimes they look really good and sometimes they just look not on it at all. I mean, they're 2-2 now. They're drawing with Team Spirit for that 3rd place at the moment. They look okay, but they're kind of, the rankings are exactly what we expected them to be at the start of the group stage right now. You know, it's like VP and Na'Vi are the top 2, then Team Spirit and Live to Win are kind of like that 3rd and 4th. And I feel like Live to Win are living up to expectations, if that makes sense. They're not blowing anybody away. They're doing fine. They're trying to get to that like 3rd mark or so, because I don't see them breaking into like VP and Na'Vi territory, who are both 4-0, by the way. And VP have yet to drop a map at all in any of their series, and Na'Vi have dropped 1 game in their like 4 series. So, I mean, it's looking increasingly likely that VP Na'Vi will be the decider for who comes 1st and 2nd in the group whenever we get that game, because I don't think it's scheduled yet. So
no, it'll be in the future, the distant future. What were Live to Win doing then that made them so variable? Are they doing anything particularly interesting? Is it just a varying in play? Is it a varying in draft?
But yeah, they've had some interesting draft things. I mean, but in general, there's been like this offlane Lycan that I feel like can be good, but it doesn't feel like it's being utilized properly. And I feel like we saw that in today's games for Live to Win as well. But like even Team Spirit, you know, we've been saying they hadn't been too hot recently. That series was so important for them. But for Live to Win in particular, it's they're 5-5 across all their games. They've won 50% of their maps across all series, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to explain it other than they just look really hot sometimes and depending. But then when it feels like when they're against the teams that are like in the top 4 around them, they seem to just fall off a little bit because for them you see this Team Spirit versus Live to Win series as kind of like we need to fight for 3rd place, right? And even though it's only like week 3, it feels like both teams were lacking like a real killer edge in a series that you feel like should be really important. Live to Win, that's how I feel about them, that they're a decent team but lack a like killer instinct almost.
Is
that they went 1 game up as well?
Yeah. Is that a lack of killer instinct coming from the cores? Because that's normally what I'd think of as lack of killer instinct, that maybe the cores aren't finishing games properly. They're not quite popping off in the way you'd expect. Like VP have GPK, who's a player who's nothing but killer instinct, in my opinion. Are they lacking that sort of player?
Maybe, kind of, but I've said this to you before. It's really difficult to nail exactly what something is unless you're within the team and their atmosphere, because it could be like communication problems, it could be draft problems that they have. Oh yeah, something I'll tell you quickly before I move on though. Live to Win in game 1 of their series today against Spirit did not have problems with their tips and aggressively tipping Team Spirit. I don't know if you watched that, Dan, but
Yeah,
it was quite entertaining. It was like, I'm a big fan of tips, and people will make jokes about them being like, oh, just a funny thing or whatever. I actually think they could be used really well for mental warfare, as I like to call it. And Live to Win definitely did that in game 1 against Spirit. But yeah, I just feel like they're not playing around like certain heroes well in their draft. Like they're sacrificing, like they're first phasing this Bat Rider, and then they're giving it this awful lane against an Oracle Ursa. And it feels like they're just throwing certain heroes away and they're not playing around them properly. So it's difficult to nail on, but they've got a big game coming up next week, which is Live to Win versus Na'Vi. And if Live to Win can win that, then great. I think they'll be back on track again. But I see it being a really difficult one for them.
Let's chat a little bit about Team Spirit there. We've just had one game this week against that Live to Win series we just mentioned. They swapped out a player for that series. From my understanding, they essentially seem to want to make a roster change, but are not allowed to. So presumably they're subbing in this new player for all the important series. How did that end up working for you?
I don't really get this whole sub thing. Why are you trying to do it now? I get before, right? There was no rules for like when subs and anything would happen before in Dota, and so it can happen at any point in a team that sometimes you feel like you need to make a sub, right? Like you want to make a change in the team. Unfortunately, it's happened in the group stage, like just as you've got to the group stage, whatever. And I'm assuming that's what it is, but it might just be that they're using them as a stand-in. I don't know, but like, I'm surprised they've decided to try and push for it now. I feel like when you're in this like area of time, you've got to try and push forward with what you have and everything you have. Then, but the problem then is if you do that, then maybe you don't make the major, and you'll be like, oh, what if we'd have made the sub before and everything? But it's like you can relate it to football or something, right? There's like 2 transfer seasons, 2 transfer windows a season, and you can't like start messing around in between those because you have no opportunity to, right? And I'm surprised Team Spirit didn't just try and kick on with what they had, and then if it didn't work, they could be like, okay, we're going to make a change now. But in Dota, time's so short. If they hadn't made the first major, they'd have been like, oh, what if? So the
player they've brought in is Miro Slaw.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know a huge amount about him. And when I watched him today, I don't think he was like massively impressive or anything. Like he did okay, but there wasn't anything that made me think, yeah, this is going to be like really good. So yeah, unsure.
Okay, let's move on to VP, who I don't think anyone would have been surprised they won their 2 matches this week, simply because they seem to win all their matches, but also because they were against the 2 weakest teams in the league, in Unique and Extremium. Did we learn anything extra about VP from these matches, or just that they continue to be quite good?
Yeah, I'm glad you said the word extra, because I was about to say VP are really good at Dota 2, the video game, but we already knew that, unfortunately.
We've covered that extensively on this.
Yeah. The Unique one was interesting because when they played Unique, it felt like Unique had a plan coming into the series, that they like opened this Wisp Tusk lane, which they did Wisp position 1. So you get the overcharge with the tag team combination and stuff. So in the laning stage, it's really strong. But Unique came out of their lanes okay. They were doing fine. Game 2, not so much. But it just gets to this point in the game where VP they understand exactly how they need to be taking fights and when they need to be taking them and when they should be hitting their timings. Like everything feels like it falls into place. And I'm going to come back to the point I made before. They haven't dropped a game yet. And they've played against They've played against Live to Win already. And they've also played. Have they played Team Spirit yet? I don't think they have.
I don't believe so. No.
No, they haven't. So they've still got Spirit and Na'Vi to come, and obviously, Na'Vi's going to be the big one. I think they're playing Spirit this week. So I think it's next Sunday. So a week today, it's two big series between the top 4 teams, and I feel like that's going to be massively group deciding because there's going to be a point there where, if Team Spirit and Live to Win lose that, there's absolutely no way that Na'Vi and VP are not getting top 2, which is a big deal. Because obviously, if you come first in the group, you get to the playoff stage. Second goes to the group stage. Third is the wild card, and nobody really wants to be in the wild card. But I think Team Spirit and Live to Win at this point will be accepting that they're fighting for it. But maybe if they can sneak a result next week against like VP or Na'Vi, maybe it will happen. But
we'll see.
I don't see it happening.
I watched that VP Unique series, and it felt to me a lot like they were a team like the older VP that people might remember, or even OG, where they just kind of suddenly switch on, and it's like the laning stage is relatively. It's not like Team Secret who just slowly grind ahead like a oncoming glacier. It's like that old team where they just suddenly go, "Boop! Now we've won," and you're like, "Okay." So you'll watch them every time, and you'll go, "Oh, maybe they'll lose this one," and then they just won't. They're an interesting team to watch.
It's entertaining though, isn't it? Because you're like, oh, I wonder how this is going, and then 2 minutes later, you're like, oh, VP are 8K up. Like it's wild. They take some amazing fights, and they're playing really well. They picked Cottle twice in that game against Unique as well, and the teams are getting. Do you remember in week 1 we talked about this Cottle not being utilized as much as we thought it would, and it feels like people are starting to catch on now. A VP especially, it's like, we're utilizing this recall really well to take the fights around the map where we're dictating the tempo effectively. It hits a point in the game where they get their items and they know they're strong and they're ready to go and they believe in each other. So honestly, the series I'm waiting for is VP Na'Vi, because everything before that for me feels like it's so, it's almost like pointless talking about it for those two teams, because we almost did, expect everybody to get 2-0'd by VP and Na'Vi until they play each other, because they just feel so much better than everybody else. Like Na'Vi today, they picked a Dark Willow, for example, and we talked about how they like to hit their 20-25 minute timings and things. Like Dark Willow's building like drums and stuff, like just so they can hit their timing and everything.
That's interesting.
And it feels like they're just. They know exactly what they want to be doing, both those two teams, whereas Team Spirit and Live to Win are still kind of finding their identity a little bit with what they like to play.
Let's have a quick note on meta of CIS. A lot of people may not have tuned into CIS yet, and they would like to know, if they were to do so, are they seeing particularly different Dota from any of the other regions? Are there things that feel at this point uniquely CIS?
Uniquely CIS? I mean, I don't know how much Disruptor's been picked in the other regions, but I feel like Disruptor's started to rear its head again. I mean, we've started to see some more like AMs and things, but not massively.
AMs, I think one of the heroes has mostly only been picked in CIS. I've not seen it anywhere else, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it too much. It's okay, but AM at the moment is so miserable to watch. So I'd rather people just didn't pick it, because there was somebody I listened to recently, I can't remember who it was, they were saying that AM basically just holds the game hostage for everybody on their team, because everybody has to wait for the AM to be able to fight for them to try and win the game. And I feel like, especially when you play against like VP and Na'Vi and things, these guys are going to run at you with tempo, and AM doesn't really fit into that kind of strategy. So the like and off lane, I think, again, is being played in other regions as well, but it's being picked more and more. But I don't think there's been nothing that's like really stood out to me apart from maybe AM, like you say. Bloodseeker, like Bristleback has been another one, especially in the lower division. There's been quite a few Bristleback games as well, like Bristleback Cotton and stuff. But again, not particularly, just CIS. So, can we talk about the lower division quickly as well?
Yes, briefly. Yes.
Even if it's just a couple of minutes. Bait played today and they lost 2-0, which is Bait's obviously Dendy's team, against Imperial Pro Gaming, which is a big shock to me. And so Dendy Watch isn't going very well. They're now 1-3 now, Bait.
They may get relegated from the lower division.
They might, but there is currently 4 teams on 1-3. The lower division is quite top heavy. Windstrike are definitely leading the charge here, but Windstrike Hellraisers are also playing each other this week, and neither of them has dropped a series yet. So that could be a really important one to see who gets promoted up to the upper division.
It's a good note to shift over to the schedule. We've got in the lower division, of course, that Windstrike Hellraisers series, which of course includes a Resolution, if you don't know, is one of the bigger players in the lower division across, I'd say, the whole world. In the upper division, though, we're seeing No Techies, who didn't play at all this week, starting off the week against Unique on February 11th, and then Extremium on February 12th. We've got Empire Unique closing off February 12th, and then we've got that big day, February 14th, Valentine's Day, Live to Win versus Navi, and VP versus Team Spirit, the top 4 decider.
Might be Valentine's Day. There's not going to be much love shown, Dan. I'm telling you, that's going to be they're going to be at each other, which I am excited for that Sunday because it should be a really important one, like we've talked about.
Okay, well, hope everyone tunes in for that, and I'll see you next week. Thank you to Mo Farah for taking us through CIS. We, however, are going to be rocketing straight away to South America, where 1437 is going to be taking us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to start, talk me through what you saw as the top games of the region this week.
There was the big one that we talked about last week. It was the Beast Coast Thunder Predator game. I told you and everybody else that, hey, this is a must-watch game. It was a must-watch game because it was supposed to be between the 2 best teams, or going into the season, we thought were the 2 best teams. And Beast Coast just absolutely stomped them. So that means that Beast Coast is just like so many notches ahead of Thunder Predator and every other team in the region right now.
So talk me through the stomp. What led to it? Were there any particular hero picks or any moments? I realized they picked a Wraith King, which we spoke before about. Being an OP hero everywhere for them.
It is, and especially in South America, Wraith King has like a 90%. Like it just feels like it has like a 90% win rate. You know, the team that plays it is just so easy to execute, and just simplifying the game for these teams is something that gives them a huge advantage. The game between Thunder Predator, I think the biggest factor was the mid lane. Leo Style versus oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name? Chris Luck. Chris Luck. Leo Style versus Chris Luck. Chris Luck is just, I think, much better than Leo Style is right now.
Okay.
And a lot has to do with rotations, how he controls the runes, how he gets the team to control the runes for him, and how he enables his side lane. And that just led to Beast Coast pretty much snowballing the early game. And once they got the early game advantage, it just felt like Thunder Predator couldn't really come back whatsoever. Thunder Predator in game 2, it was a much closer of a game, but Beast Coast, you know, they utilized their knowledge, their expertise, you know, whatever they picked up over the years to like understand when they shouldn't fight and understand at what point which items they're going to be able to take the fights of Thunder Predator, which Thunder Predator I feel like have been lacking throughout this tournament so far.
So that second game you'd say was closer, but it was a shorter game. It was only 32 minutes. Was it just a more explosive end and closer kind of middle?
Yeah, it was like a closer game in the early mid, and then all of a sudden Thunder Predator, they had Leo Style, he dropped the Ravage in front of the tier 3 just randomly. It wasn't really a kill that they were able to get on the enemy carry on the Chaos Knight, and then when that Ravage was on cooldown in the late game, it's a pretty big thing because it's a long cooldown spell. And then Beast Coast just ran right back at them. They finished all of their items and they won a fight straight up 5-0. And then a minute later, when Thunder Predator was alive again, they lost another fight instantly 5-0. And the game was just over at that point because they knew there's no way that they could come back from that game. And Beast Coast network just skyrocketed. They got another set of items within like 2 minutes time. And that's why it kind of ended a little bit faster, where the first game was more like, okay, we are just trying to crawl our way back into the game under pressure. So they did everything they can to possibly delay the game, delay their loss, and that's why maybe it lasted a little longer.
So I think we can quite safely say that Beast Coast seem like the best team in the region. They're the team with the most experience.
Definitely.
Team who are the best at tempering their aggression. But Thunder Predator, where do you think this leaves them? Because they've now lost 2 Series 1 to Infamous, and now the second to Thunder Predator. Do you think they're still a strong squad?
Yeah, I think Thunder Predator, what needs to happen is they need to win every other game from here on out. That's for sure. And they also need SG Esports to drop the series to Beast Coast and somebody else. Like, that just needs to happen, I think, for Thunder Predator to do well. I think Thunder Predator still have their series against Yeah, so SG Esports, like Thunder Predator beat SG Esports, but SG only lost one series, so they're gonna lose maybe to like Beast Coast. But I think if Thunder Predator maybe can win all the games, I'm not entirely sure what the tiebreaker rules are. Hopefully next week I'll be able to tell you what's gonna happen between that. But I think if the safest scenario is SG, they lose 2 series, so 1 to Beast Coast and 1 to another team, and then Thunder Predator should still be able to get top 2.
Mm-hmm. And so the people who haven't been watching the region, who may now be tuning in to kind of discover the Beast Coast a force once again, because I think during the period when we had NA and SA as the 2 joint regions, Beast Coast were consistently quite disappointing. They never really hit the top of that period, and Thunder Predator with the South American side that did quite well. What do you think the Beast Coast have changed up now that's made them an effective team once again?
Yeah, I think they're taking things much more seriously now, where like previously, you know, all the online tournaments maybe was weighing down on them. Maybe they felt like, oh, this is like, we're too good for this. They're just waiting for them like majors and things like that to happen. And now that it's between, you know, South America, I think Beast Coast have like a chip on their shoulder. You know, they want to be like the best South American. There's like a lot of pride in that, where like when you're competing between South America and NA, it's really weird because you got a lot of ping problems and things like that. So I think Beast Coast just showing up for this tournament. They train well, I think, and they play a lot of pubs, which is going to make them a really strong team, and you can see that in the performance.
Mm-hmm. Let's go a bit further down the bracket then into the other games this week. Infamous versus SG was won 2-0 by SG. Mm-hmm. Talk me through that game. Is there much to mention there? Is it a stomp?
It was a pretty big stomp. I would say both of the games. They had Beastmaster and they had Lycan in the second game. Like they play a lot off of tower pushing. And one of the things about SG is they realize how strong Beastmaster is, which has been good in other regions. But in South America, I think this is like an exceptionally good hero because a lot of teams don't know how to play against it well. It's something I talked about in the last cast when we watched SG versus LATAM Defenders. The moment I saw Beastmaster, I'm like, yeah, GG. Like I saw the draft of SG, I'm like, there's no way. I would bet my house that SG was gonna win that game, like no matter what. As soon as I saw the draft ending, and when they play in LATAM Defenders, same thing. They push for that Beastmaster earlier, and second game, LATAM Defenders, instead of banning the Beast, they try to counter it, and they lost as well. And this Beastmaster had like an insanely fast Necro Book 3 timing, took the tier 1 towers early, which like the South American teams suffer a lot when they fall behind in the early game.
It feels like they're one of the only teams kind of globally who are leaning in so heavily to that Zoo meta, the Lycan, the Beastmaster. They're always picking Nature's Prophet.
With the Wraith King, a bunch of auras and things like that. It works really well for them. I think SG typically is not a super aggressive team. So having these tower pushers, these natural tower pushers on their lineup enables their playstyle, essentially. It makes their gameplay for the rest of the players much easier because they can just focus on their farm, their rotations, instead of focusing on everything, including the tower damage aspect. So hopefully in the future, when we see SG play, people will be banning this Beastmaster against them, because I do think that's their best hero.
Yeah, the series last week that they lost, they kind of played quite a different style. So it feels like this week, in both their series, the 1-2 series this week, they've gone back towards what they know, perhaps a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Maybe also learning from Thunder Predator, because the game 2 they lost against Thunder Predator, they had this Beastmaster who was doing a lot of work, and maybe they picked up on that. That's what happens between a lot of these teams. Like they lose something, and then they're like, why did we lose? And then typically the response becomes, oh, this hero is too OP. And then they're like, why is this so OP? And then they figure out why it's OP. And now they try to incorporate that into their own gameplay. And if it works, now they like identify themselves as a team who plays this OP hero. In their eyes, it might be. But if you see other regions, like, you know, they don't prioritize Beastmaster super highly, because the other regions are better at dealing with a hero like Beastmaster or any other OP heroes that may arrive.
And to go briefly into Infamous, they're now in somewhat of a weak position, I would say, in the standings. They're sitting in 6th. Mm-hmm. Are you worried for them as a team? Do you think they could?
Yeah, I am. I think the problem with Infamous is after the Thunder Predator series, maybe they got a little too cocky. I don't feel like they play as well as a team right now, which is a huge problem. Maybe when they're playing against Thunder Predator, they're like, oh, these guys are like one of the top teams in the region, so they're like, banding together. But in the other series against Unknown, they fell apart. Now they lost against SG. I think there's going to be this downward spiral for them. They might pick up another series, but their next matchup is Beast Coast, so that's going to give them more negativity.
Yeah. And let's go briefly into the other remaining matches that we've not spoken about. They're all by teams towards the bottom of our predictions. So LATAM Defenders lost 2-1 to No Ping, and Ego Boys were beaten by Team Unknown 2-0. Is there much for you to sink your teeth into there? Do they feel quite standard matches?
I think those are pretty standard. Not a lot going to be happening with these two teams at the bottom. I think No Ping Esports might also make it somewhere down in there. Their performance hasn't been too hot, but maybe I know the panel for South America has a lot of hopes for Dark Mago, so maybe he might turn up, but it's really difficult. I think for me, the three worst teams right now are probably LATAM Defenders, Ego Boys, and No Ping.
And the Team Unknown, they are somewhat higher than we might have expected. They're currently sitting in third place. They've had, I think, some fairly easy games, but they did also get beaten by Beast Coast as one of their losses. How are you feeling about them as a squad so far?
They're not so bad. I think they play really well like a team, and they have some cool strategies. They busted on Alchemist in one of their series, so that was pretty nice to see. I think this is a team that could potentially have an upset here and there, but they're going to need a little bit more experience from what I've seen.
This week, as we're settling a little bit more into the meta of each region and we feel a little bit farther along, I'm asking everyone a little bit about how the meta of this region is differing from everywhere else. Do you feel that you're seeing any particularly SA-focused things begin to emerge, or does it feel quite standard?
We've got this theory that if a team has Wraith King, Bat Rider, or Beastmaster, they essentially just like auto win or have like an insanely high win rate. It doesn't matter like which team is playing against which team. Like those are the key heroes of the region. Other than that, it's very standard stuff. I think Coddle maybe is one of the exception where we don't see a lot of, where in the other regions it's like a top ban or top pick hero. There's some teams that play with Coddle, but they're just not so good with it. You got the Nyx Assassins getting banned out, some Enchantresses, pretty typical stuff, I would say. It's just like those big win rate guys like Wraith King, Bat Rider, and Beastmaster have exceptionally high win rates, especially in South America.
Do you think that's a sense of the region maturing a little bit, or perhaps due to the collaboration with North America that went over lockdown? Because I remember before, a couple of years ago, SA felt like a very different region. It felt as if they did very different things to the rest of the world. Do you feel it's now beginning to mature and become in line with the rest of the world?
I think the more you play Dota, especially over COVID, you got all the professional players. They got nothing else to do. They don't travel. They stay in the regions they play, right? So the more you play, the more everything becomes the same. There's less chances for different stuff to happen. It's because like everybody tends to study whoever they believe is to be good, like Secret or OG or Nigma or like some 4 a.m., some Chinese teams and things like that. So eventually everything kind of bleeds into all the other regions, and then whoever wins more matchmaking points with whatever hero, that's the hero that everybody else is also going to pick up. It doesn't matter which region it is.
There you go. Okay, let's close up by taking a look at the games we can expect next week. On February 10th, we've got No Ping versus Thunder Predator, Beast Coast versus Team Infamous. On February 12th, we've got LATAM Defenders versus Team Unknown, Ego Boys versus SG Sports, and finally closing off, we've got Infamous versus No Ping on February the 13th. Would your pick be Beast Coast again, or is there something else?
Yeah, I would take Thunder Predator versus No Ping. It's going to be TP all day. Beast Coast versus Infamous, same thing. Beast Coast all day. Unknown versus Defenders, that's probably going to be a closer matchup, but I would lean towards Unknown for that one. Ego Boys versus SG. SG, I think, are going to be destroying them unless Ego Boys ban out this Beastmaster, and maybe we'll see what SG will try to do with it. But I think they probably have backup plans already, realizing that they can't get away with winning with this hero every game. But yeah, I definitely can favor that. And Infamous versus No Ping, I think that's probably going to be the closest series out of all these games, and I hope Infamous will be able to come out as a better team.
Okay, we'll watch that then. I just want to briefly, you might not have watched this, but in the lower division this week, we had the team Inverse play with a stand-in who GG'd out at 13 minutes. Did you watch that?
Oh, no, that's one of the Division 2 games we did not watch. Yeah. But I heard about that.
So it ended in 13 minutes when their mid laner, who was a stand-in, decided to hide in the trees, and they didn't notice for about a minute, and then GG'd out. So there's a little bit
it's
of
not a
drama
good
going
sign.
on in lower
I
division.
mean, Inverse is last place, and they probably realize that they're not going to get a single dollar out of playing in this division. So I think maybe that kind of plays something in there for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there then. But thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you to 1437 for taking us through South America. He's always very good value, and I enjoyed that one a lot. And we're going to be moving on straight away to Kips, who is going to be taking us through China. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through the main stories of the region this week.
Yeah, so really the story for China right now is that we finally know more or less where everybody stands. In the first 2 weeks, we had, for example, Elephant underperforming in the top bracket, but you could still think, all right, maybe, there was a fluke or they had to warm up. You could see Magma and LBZS sinking to the bottom. And you could also think, all right, maybe they're underperforming. But this week, we've had a ton of matchups with teams that were very close to each other in the rankings. So now we can definitively see sort of how the rankings are going to shape up for this season. And it doesn't look that good for Elephant, to be honest.
Yeah, they're in a weaker position than a lot of us thought they might have been. I think all of the teams at this kind of mid stage, the teams that we thought were going to be dominating the region aren't quite dominating the region. The teams that we thought might struggle a little bit, which is Team Astra and Invictus Gaming, are beginning to look very, very strong. Let's start then by talking through IG's match this week, in which they 2-0'd Vici Gaming. What ended up happening there?
Yeah, so IG versus Vici was a bit of a struggle, honestly. Both of their carry players, both Ajit as well as Poyo, who's Erica, so the guy that 23 Savage would have originally replaced. Their carries don't really look too good, and Vici honestly just took that one on drafting more stable heroes for their carry and really letting their support shine. They had an amazing Phoenix game over on... Let's see, who was it again? An amazing Sven game as well on their offlane, actually. Basically, everyone looked really very good except for the carries.
So it's really a loss that happened from the front rather than an overall team loss.
Yeah, I'd say so. Ajit still plays very much like a mid player. He doesn't have the farming patterns of a carry. He doesn't have the confidence of a carry either, it seems. It seems like he's too impatient to really carry the game on late. So unfortunately for him, I don't think his role switch is going to be a success.
Okay, that's a shame to hear. Let's go into Invictus Gaming then, because they're a team that a lot of people had seen struggle over the past year. A lot of roster changes. They're back to a similar roster now. How's that roster gelling? What's turning out so well for them? Because we spoke there just about how Vici Gaming failed. What did IG do so well?
Yeah, so what IG is really good at right now is they have a really good role division between either their carry or their mid. So it's either up to Fly or up to Emo to really make the game move. And I think I've spoken about Emo before. He's such a technically capable player. And when it's an Emo game, it's an Emo game. Well, he had a couple of those this week. And the most spectacular of that one, which was versus Vici, actually. Because he was up versus a Bristleback, and he just went straight Vessel. No nonsense with, oh, but I want an Orchid, or I want heals or something. No, just item for the team, Spirit Vessel. And of course, a Void Spirit is already very good against a Bristle, because you turn him around. But with those two items combined, there was just really all those tanky heroes over on the side of Vici. They were butter, basically. And Emo just slides straight through them. I think he was 18-0 or something ridiculous like that.
What hero was he playing that game?
Void Spirit.
Okay. So
Sorry,
that's quite
should have.
No, but that's quite an interesting item build. If he's moving into, he's very flexible. He's working well with the team. Does it feel just like IG are a well-gelled unit? Is it, because you mentioned individuals there, but do they just feel more balanced and strong as a team overall compared to, say, Vici Gaming?
Vici is also pretty cohesive on a team level, but again, they also have some carry problems with Erica. So in the end, it feels like they're trying to make up a bit for the fact that they know that their end game is not going to be as strong as the enemies, so they hurry too much. So, but yeah, IG look much tighter, and it's really IG versus Aster is going to be the battle for the top spot, and I never would have thought that at the start of this season.
Because people now may be tuning into IG games that they otherwise wouldn't have, what sort of key picks or key strategies can we look out for from IG? For IG? Well, at the start of the season, they were very heavily into Morphling, which they play on both Fly as well as Emo, and of course the Emo Storm Spirit, and they're diversifying a bit now. Emo's played some great games on Puck, he's played some great games over on the Void Spirit, as I said right now, and for example, Fly has played a Sven. You see, it has been my opinion that Sven is not actually dead. He is still a farming monster. He just doesn't have the incredibly OP talents anymore. And they showcase that very neatly, that even a Sven who dies 2 times is still absolutely capable of out-farming anyone. And apart from that, their drafts are not that different from the rest of the region. Because they used to feel like quite a different team. They were a team that seemed to be on a different wavelength, I think, to the rest of China. Or do you think they've now acclimatized, not acclimatized, but moved in line with everyone else?
Yeah, I think their drafts have definitely moved a little bit more in line. They're playing Shadow Shaman now. Their what is it? Yeah, their Timbersaw pick was a little bit different than before. But apart from that, Tidehunter, Void Spirit, yeah, they're a lot more meta right now. And I think it's good that they've sort of gotten off the Morphling train. It wasn't that stable for them.
Fair enough. Let's go into the other top team then, Team Aster, who are played 1 game this week, which they ended up 2-0 against eHome. Talk me through that match there.
Yeah, that eHome match was really dominating, honestly. Bit of a draft win as well. They had a Medusa go completely out of control in the first game, and then second game they were up against a Drow Ranger, and I don't want to keep harping on how about both Ajit as well as Erica look wobbly right now, but that was also Ajit blinked in with that Drow Ranger a couple of times into a lineup that had, I believe, a Tidehunter on it as well. You're a Drow. You can't afford to do that. It looked it was rough. And of course, Aster is very much an unshakable wall right now. They were one of the first who were on top of this Earthshaker shard that I think you've seen throughout this week in all regions. And they had a bit of a show with that as well.
It's good to see. Well, I remember I watched quite a bit of that series, and XM, who's a player we've spoken about quite a lot in this series, as a player who's very, very talented but hasn't yet shown a potential necessarily in competitive games. He, again, I think struggled a little bit. Would you agree with that? How do you think he showed up across those 2 games?
Yeah, like I think he lanes nicely, but then afterwards he's very much, I won't want to say a pop player, but he seems a bit lost. It doesn't feel like he quite knows how to direct his team with the momentum that he's got. And maybe that's just an emotional thing. Like he doesn't quite know how to direct his team yet. Or like he knows what he wants to do, but he doesn't know how to say it. Or maybe he truly does not quite have a feel for how it gets played at the pro level yet. Which is, the second one seems a bit unlikely to me. So I think it's more about the first, like just no leadership skills yet. And that can grow. That can always grow.
We hadn't really, I think, before this week spoken too much about Team Aster. That we'd mentioned them a little bit in passing. Who have been the key players for them this season? Who's really standing out?
Boba guy's back.
Okay, that's good to hear. Big Boba.
Yeah,
fan.
in a big way. He made some. I said Earthshaker show. That was all him. He had a couple of 3-man Echo Slams, 4-man Echo Slams. Controlled entire team fights. His item build, if I remember correctly, was Blink Dagger, Shard, Octarine Core
Oh, wow.
on an Earthshaker. That's how much of a bowler that man is. 2 slots in his inventory were occupied, and it was a Blink Dagger and an Octarine Core.
That's crazy.
And boots, brown boots, but you know.
How are their cores looking? Is it a 4-position team? Is it a team that's being run by Baboka and maybe Lanham as well, or are their cores excelling too?
I think they're doing they're not falling away by any means. I think Monet has been doing good XSS. White Album is the one who I knew the least about and who I found really satisfying to watch as a player, especially on SF. That man is, the thing that we talked about with XM, that he doesn't quite know where to go after he's won the lane. Well, White Album shows up as a very dominant force if he does so.
That's good to hear. Okay, just briefly before we move on to, I think, what will be the headline match for a lot of people this week. The second game from both of these teams that lost in those matches we've just spoken to about eHome and VG was won by VG 2-0. Was that a case of two slightly weaker teams clashing and one coming out ahead, or were there signs of life there for VG?
All of the support play looked extremely tight. PYW had an amazing game on Phoenix, basically straight up winning the game for his team, but it was definitely necessary because the clash of the court was as wobbly as I said before. But if you want to learn how to play Phoenix, you should go look at that series. That was that the first or the second game? Don't quite remember right now. Yeah, Vici, PYW, yeah, the first game from him. Absolutely excellent.
Cool. Well, people
brilliant egg placement, unreachable every single time and still in the middle.
Excellent. Good to hear. Okay, let's move to what we earmarked last week as a headline match of the week, Elephant versus PSG LGD. PSG LGD entered this match ahead of Elephant in the standings, but only narrowly, 2-2 versus 2-1. Talk me through what happened in that series.
Yeah, so that series, I mean, at the start, it really felt like LGD was going to keep their place. The first game looked pretty dominant from Ame. Let's see, there was a Monkey King. And Eurus, Paparazzi on TB, he just felt he made several strange plays. He got caught out a couple of times. Of course, he was versus a puck, I believe, as well. So that was not the greatest for him, but he was forced into a BKB purchase on a Terrorblade. And it felt rough. So I thought honestly that Elephant was probably done after that game. They looked shaky. Eurus has always been their standout player for me. Big fan of Paparazzi. And he was just nowhere. And then as it turns out, when they got him a Troll Warlord, he was all over the place. Yeah. So game two, great clockwork by Red Panda, and Eurus with his Troll Warlord, he got a 12-minute Battle Fury, and he just absolutely ran over the enemy Medusa. There was no stopping whatsoever.
So would you say that those final two victories from Elephant were a case of them really showing up, or is it PSG LGD taking the foot of the pedal somewhat?
I think the second game was definitely mostly Elephant showing up. And of course, they got the picks that they wanted. They got that Troll Warlord for Eurus. They got several other heroes that they've been really successful with in the past as well. So the clockwork for Red Panda, I already sort of picked that one out. But then later on, they got a Bat Rider over on the mid lane as well. For the third game, I should say, the second win for Elephant, because they will, of course, go on to win that series in the end.
So kind of a 4-protect T1 style, they're building around Paparazzi rather than more balanced
and
that we've seen across China.
I said he had a 12-minute Battle Fury in the first game. He also had a 12-minute Battle Fury in the second game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That man was absolutely unstoppable.
Good to hear. Can we expect PSG LGD to pick themselves up next week as we move into the schedule? My perfect segue. They're playing IG on the February the 26th. What do you expect to see from that game? Do they really have to win that? Is that an absolute must-win for them?
Several teams out of China go on through, but IG... I think IG, they have a better chance, definitely, than taking down Aster. Aster look immaculate right now. LGD, as long as they keep their draft solid, they have a really good shot. Like this last game, for example, what happened was that they had a Death Prophet and a Wraith King as their cores. And over on the enemy side, they would be laning against either a Lycan or a Bat Rider. And earlier today, I'd already seen that Death Prophet actually does just fine in lane versus a Bat Rider, which would have been the mid matchup, because that was Somnus on the Bat Rider as well. But instead, they decided to lane the Wraith King mid and the Death Prophet on the safe lane versus the Lycan, and they kind of lost both of them. If they don't do anything like that, then I think they're definitely got it in the bag, or at least in the bag. Let's say they got their chances at the ready, because IG, I've seen them stumble too. If the chemistry between Flyfly and Emo goes wrong, then they could easily sink right back down. But for now, they've been holding strong. So LG is going to have to push them a little bit.
Okay, good to hear. And then the rest of the week on the February the 23rd, we've got two probably easy wins for Astra and IG against LBZS and Magma. Expect those to win that day, both 4-0. And then finally on February the 28th, we've got eHome versus Elephant and then VG versus Asta. And I will remind everyone that after this week, China goes into a break for New Year's, am I correct in saying? So this is kind of where we're at the midpoint of the season. We'll see. Some of
this
these
is the
teams.
midpoint. I'm free for 2 weeks after this podcast releases. So if any of you need an analyst, I'm available.
Yeah, so we've got a little while to wait for these games, but we'll see how they come across. Maybe the entire Dota world will be completely different after.
It's very possible. And we all know that Chinese teams only really get warmed up after Chinese New Year is over. So who knows what we see after they come back from the break.
Okay, well, we'll wait for that then. But thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you to Kips for taking us through China. We're, however, going to be rocketing straight away to Southeast Asia, where Danog is going to take us through proceedings there. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what you see as the top matches in SAA this week.
So we're talking about the week past, the week that's already been gone, or the week to come?
The week that's passed.
Honestly, they were all good. It was all 3-game series. You know, there was going down to the wire in every single one. There was some upsets. There was like hour-long plus games. There was rapiers. Everything was happening. So it's great to see a lot of these teams, even though, you know, the series wins disparities might be there. You know, Neon, now they're sitting at 4-0. They were still taken to 3 games by Execration, who are sitting at 1-3. So it's good to see that it's always going to be competitive. It's not like some of the other regions where, you know, you've got it's like a foregone conclusion what the result is going to be. C, you know, might not be at the pinnacle of, you know, top skill, top cohesion and all that sort of thing. I'd say it's number 3. But it is number 1 for entertainment for mine.
I think it's the only region that's so far had a week full of 2-1. So I think every single one of those series is probably worth picking up and talking about. But let's start by talking about the current standings leader, Neon versus Execration in that 2-1 you mentioned. What ended up happening in that game?
Honestly, it was just Neon domination. The game 2 was the result of a Troll Warlord build that was a little bit odd, not really fitting the stage of the game that it should have been. So Natsumi just goes for this this Ags into the Eternal Shroud, which is totally fine, but they just needed a little bit more damage super early on because there wasn't really anything that they needed to dispel. It just felt a little bit off for the way that Neon liked to play. And, you know, their other 2 games were done in 25 and 22 minutes. They're just a team that loves to run at you, put you off your game super early on and not allow you to get back into it. So I think it was just... I think it was Lacoste that talked about it on the panel at the time. You know, when you look at the Southeast Asian region, you've got, you know, a lot of very skilled players and a lot of skilled teams, but they're just lacking that consistency. Neon are probably the closest to being there. You know, obviously with the results going their way, I'd probably say Fnatic as well, even though they were upset by Boom this week. But you do see a couple of these things creeping in where it's like, well, actually this item build doesn't fit with the style of draft that you've gone to really be competing against the secrets and the like. That's something that they're going to need to fine tune.
So what are we seeing currently from Neon mostly? Are they favouring any particular picks? Is there anything that is making them stand out across the region?
I would say the Troll Warlord is like their key pick that they have around themselves, just because they do like to play it in a multitude of roles. You know, we've seen Natsumi played in the carry position. We've seen Januel played in the position 5. We've seen it on Play Hard in the 3 role. So it's just that so versatile pick where you have to counter it. You have to pick something that's going to be able to, kite it around or itemize a hero that can itemize appropriately for the battle trance. But if they go too heavy into that, the enemy team, then you can just toss it as a 5, and you've countered around something that's not actually the win condition. So that's something that I'm really enjoying coming out from them.
Okay, let's go to Fnatic then, who we said they got upset by Boom. That was a series that we might have expected them to win. What ended up happening in that series?
Yeah, I mean, on the show last week, I was saying, look, Fnatic are probably going to 2-0 them. I could see Boom going 2-1, but it was just Makoto, man. Makoto went bonkers. One more time. He just does it every single week, it seems. And what was his score? Let's have a quick look. It was 16, 2, and 9 on his Storm Spirit. Again, letting through the Makoto Storm Spirit shouldn't be let to happen. And it was the last pick as well, so they had plenty of chances to ban it out. And then the second time around, it was his Queen of Pain. They actually didn't end up banning the Storm. Oh, sorry, they did ban the Storm in the last phase, but then he just goes the Quap. It fulfills a very similar sort of niche. He just knows, similar to Yopaj for Neon, how to extend just the amount to be able to survive, bait out a lot of TPs, and then on top of that, he's, spell usage is just fantastic.
Would you describe the games as close? Could Fnatic have easily taken that series?
I think so, and I think it was something that Drew actually ended up performing to his potential this time around, because I was reading, I'm always watching the game, so I was in Twitch chat, and a lot of people are saying like, oh, but these heroes don't really suit Drew, the ones that are in the meta, da-da-da-da-da. Troll is one of his best heroes, so he came out of that game number 3, I believe, 8-0 and 11 on the Troll Warlord. He's also great on the PL. And imagine that was the other hero that he won with. But the fact that Faceless Void isn't quite in the meta, the fact that let's say the Naga Siren isn't quite in the meta, it shouldn't really impact you all that much, considering you've got 2 very strong heroes right now that you are very capable of playing.
Mm-hmm. And Fnatic as well, do you think that's a disappointing performance for them? Is it, again, just that they got outclassed in certain aspects, or do you feel they didn't perform up to scratch?
I'd say it's a bit of both. I think, again, you cannot let Boom have the Storm Spirit. I think more teams just need to go all into locking down Makoto, because if he has even an average game, or let's say a good game, you've got a good chance of winning. He just needs to absolutely pop off for Boom to have any chance in my books. And teams just seem to keep letting him do it. I don't know why.
Let's move on then to Boom's second series there, where they were somewhat more inconsistent, losing 2-1 to T1. Was that Makoto, was he shut down effectively in that game, or did something else happen there?
He was shut down effectively, but also the hero picks didn't really fit his style totally. I mean, he got picked a Razor in one of them, and that's definitely not the Makoto way of doing things. He's all about being able to, use the utmost of mechanics to be able to outplay people. I remember an old, I don't think it was TI, I think it was like ESL Birmingham, perhaps, where Makoto was just playing a Monkey King, and he's being able to use Mischief to dodge out TA meld strikes, for example, and use that to be able to turn around with a boundless strike and things of that nature. And, things like the Monkey King, things like the Queen of Pain, all of the different spirits, they're what Makoto really shines on. So to give him something that's a little bit more passive, like the Razor, just doesn't seem to fit what Boom's strengths are.
And what were T1 doing for that game? What sort of things have they been picking?
They've been picking a lot of push. Like they in one game they picked, I think it was a Wraith King, so the skeletons just to be able to passively push. They picked the Death Prophet and they picked the Beastmaster. They also get into the Dragon Knight. So you're always going to have some areas of the map that you just can't deal with. I think in game number 3, I want to say, it was, I'm just going to highlight Makoto again, even though we're talking about T1. It was a 41-minute game. T1 got 24 kills, Boom got 9. Now, Boom is a team that likes to be very aggressive. So the fact that Makoto was 2-1-4 in 41 minutes meant that T1's movement was just absolutely fantastic. You know, you always have to worry about the Beastmaster split push. You've got the skeletons that you could, just commit to pushing down towers and while you're farming or fighting or whatever else it might be. And then you've also got the Dragon Knight to rally around. So they were just dividing up the map perfectly and taking the correct team fights. So even though they might not have been losing too much from their priority heroes. Like I think Drew only died 2 times as well in a 41-minute game. Towers and objectives are what win you the games.
Mm-hmm. Are there any particular key players for T1 this week? Because I think previously when we've talked about them, we've kind of presented them as quite an even team. They've got strong fundamentals, a strong drafting mechanics. Has anyone stood out this week?
I would say probably Cuckoo, considering like the way that they won the game. I think it would be heavily based off of his captaincy style. So he's going to be the one shot calling. He's going to be the one saying, right, you need to push here while we're doing this over here. So that's always fantastic. And I feel like I want to see Whitemon become a lot more of a household name, because even from the position 5 role where he has basically 0 net worth, he makes so much happen, both through space creation as well as just individual play. I'm a little sad that Enchantress kind of sucks for this meta right now, because I think he's one of the best in the world on that hero.
Let's close up then by looking at T1's final series of the week, the 2-1 loss to TNC, which featured 2 60-plus minute games. TNC have been somewhat disappointing so far in the DPC. They've lost 2 games to Neon and Execration. Was this a redeeming game for them, or is it a failure?
It was. I mean, I think it was just a really hardly contested game of Dota. 3 games, PA was picked in every single one of them, and it lost every single time. So even though these rapiers came out, it wasn't able to pull the teams across the line. I think Febby described it as the hardest series that TNC have ever played. So that just goes to show you the struggle that was there. There was also a little bit of spice in this one as well, considering you've got March, who's now the coach of T1, who was kicked from TNC to be able to bring Febby in, just obviously feeling it didn't work. So Febby will be breathing a sigh of relief that he was able to pull that one out as well.
March is coaching.
Yes,
T1,
coaching T1 at the moment.
Do you notice when we talk about these coaches, do you notice any of March's style in the T1 play as a player that you know?
I feel like perhaps he's one of the more he throws out a lot of hypotheticals, but he's not the one to actually put the execution together. He's one of those styles of players that he likes to live in the moment in both drafts as well as in-game shot calling. And of course, with in-game shot calling as a coach, you can't really be there. This isn't Counter-Strike. This is Dota.
Yeah.
It's just straight up not allowed. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of the heroes that he really pioneered as being the 5s, like his Venomancer 5, hasn't really been picked up all that much. He loves the Warlock. They're not really going that way for themselves. So I feel like he's got a little bit of flavor. He's there because obviously T1 Korea, there's the connection, and he's a very established name. But I still feel like it is very much Cuckoo's team.
Mm-hmm. Let's close up then by talking a little bit about the Southeast Asian meta. I think at the halfway point now of the DPC, it's I think fair to say that we can begin to determine how different regions are looking differently. Is there anything that Southeast Asia is doing that you've not noticed in any other the regions that you've been watching?
I've only really been watching outside of I've been watching some China and a little bit of Europe. So I guess just the puck, the Bat Rider is being heavily prioritized. Troll, I suppose. Pango is quite a staple here in the Southeast Asian region. But nothing super out of the ordinary, to be perfectly honest. Maybe just picking around these heroes that have insane comeback potentials, like the PA. It's still, despite all the 3 losses in this series, it's got like a 65% win rate in the Southeast Asian region. So a lot of hope being given through to these RNG mechanics from C.
It's interesting. Okay, we'll move on then to next week or this week in the upper division on February 10th. It's the day after tomorrow. We have Vice versus Fnatic, TNC versus Boom. February 11th, we've got Vice versus Neon. On February 13th, we've got Execration versus T1 and Fnatic versus 496. Are there any particular picks there for you? TNC Boom would be mine. Do you agree?
TNC Boom, yeah, as well as Fnatic 496. I feel like Fnatic 496, even though they're, 496 are sitting in 7th, I believe, and Fnatic are 2nd, so opposite ends of the table, it's just two really contrasting styles. 496, again, I feel like I'm saying this like a broken record. They just run at you all the time. And so is Fnatic's more composed style of playing, there's just stable Dota going to be able to handle that? Or are they going to crumble under the pressure? Who knows? And you mentioned, of course, TNC and Boom. There's a real logjam from that 2nd to 5th position with 4 teams sitting on 2 wins. Fnatic's only got the 1 loss. The others have 2 losses, but it's still a lot to play for. This is one of those, we call them in Australia like an 8-point game where, a win is twice as good because you're taking a win away from one of your biggest competitors, and there's only 3 spots up for grabs for that major.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's SEA, just from look at the standings and also the matches I've watched, it definitely seems like the closest region. There's, obviously Neon are 4-0, but they're still 8-3 in overall games, which no other region is as close as that. So I think exciting times ahead for Southeast Asia.
Exactly. Even in the lower division, every single team has got to win. Like the teams that were winless take games off teams that hadn't won, that hadn't lost. So it's pretty even across the board.
Okay. Well, much to look forward to then. So thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Thanks, as always, to Danog for taking us through Southeast Asia. Always a pleasure. We are going to be moving away to maybe the headline region. We'll see, where T Governor is going to be taking us through Europe. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through what you see of the top matches in EU this week.
This week, crikey. I think Secret has to be hands down the best series. If you want to go back and watch highlights, which everyone should, Game 1, Secret v Liquid, an absolute corker of how a team can always find a way to win in what should be a doomy and gloomy situation. So yeah, Game 1, Secret v Liquid, true perfection of Dota 2.
Talk me through what happened in that match, because I think I missed that one.
So basically, it was a kind of last pick Timbersaw situation from Liquid. They had a Lycan, Mars, mid-Mars, very aggressive lineup. They pretty much throttled Secret out of the game, and Secret had to rely on a lot of split push. They had the Furin offlane with a Shard, very good split push, a Lone Druid, great split push. And eventually, the game got to the point where Liquid couldn't ever just run down a lane and end the game because they had this rat non-stop occurring. And eventually, the Secret just kind of turned it around, and it was a beautiful sight to see. But if you were Liquid, you'd be kicking yourself just for not being able to decisively try and end that game. And I think Game 2, it wasn't even that close. I think it was just a masterclass from Secret, and I think Game 1 maybe broke the spirit of Liquid a little bit.
Would you describe Game 2 as kind of classic? So in another one of these episodes this week, I described Secret as being a bit like a glacier that just kind of slowly grind towards you, destroying everything. Yeah. Was it exactly similar to one of those matches where they just win and you're like, oh, they're winning constantly?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Game 2 was just Secret, just like bulldozing over. Game 1, I think, Liquid had a much more fight. They should have probably won it. It was maybe 1 or 2 strategic calls that they didn't make correctly during the game. But again, it's so hard when you're playing up against Secret, the pressure, the intensity, and then like they never seem to be scared. Even if they're behind, they always feel like they can win. I remember I was watching it in the green room with Carl and Shiva, and I was like, see who's going to win this game. At like minute 25-30, when Liquid was like destroying, I was like, I don't think they're going to win it, guys. And then suddenly it was like ticking over. I was like, oh, Secret's going to win it. But yeah, no team rivals them right now. No team.
And was it quite similar in the Secret Enigma series? Was it, again, just 2 very quick victories? Or was there anything more interesting happening there?
The games did last 43 minutes, but that was because of Nigma's resilience and kind of split pushing waves. But yeah, it wasn't even. I think Secret basically put the Timberman mid both games on these like hard countering heroes that were scaling the win condition and had complete free farm because the matchups were pretty good. So yeah, it was strategically Secret just had the edge on Nigma, and then because of that, they don't really make mistakes and just won the game. But the scoreboard and kind of the idea of the length of the game does make you think, oh, Enigma was in it. But realistically, after 10 minutes of the game, Secret didn't make any mistakes, and they just kind of methodically waited until they were ready to win the game. I think in the first game, it was a PL carry. Yeah, that was it. And they waited for like Crimson Guard Shivas BKBs, everything for them before the end of the game. Like they waited for like the third Roshan as well. Like they were very, very disciplined.
Do you think we learned anything new about Team Secret this week, or is it just a case of them doing what they've always done?
I think for Secret, they are demonstrating some new strategies, being like they're opening up with Willow, for example. They've cemented how good Shaker is, but of course other regions have also done that before. I think China was mainly the first region to showcase that. They're just I guess in terms of learning or improvement points, they're not scared to pick the best hero when they see it and then try and ban as much for it. Like in the first phase, a lot of teams shifted away from picking like a boss core, and then Secret have come back into this season going, well, we are just going to pick a Slark and completely dismantle your ability to play this mid bat. And I think their flexibility is just second to none. I think Liquid was one of the few teams that really rivaled Secret in their ability to surprise you with like the physical role swapping. But Secret has not the role swaps, but their laning and just understanding of entering that game. Like before the horn sounds, they've like masterminded their way to get the most out of any draft and any lane. And that's so scary because if you have one weakness in your draft, Secret is going to exploit it some way. And that's what they showed this week is you have to have the most, like the easiest draft or clean draft, and you have to know how you're going to play the first 15 minutes against them. Because if you have one kind of weakness in it, they will kind of stumble their way into finding it if they haven't found it instantly. It's very, very scary.
It's interesting to see them, as you mentioned, that first game become more than a laning team as well, because they've been kind of a laning team for a while. They always win in lanes, and then 15 minutes in, you know that Team Secret are going to win. I think the fact that they're showing even more than that is probably quite scary for anyone else hoping to take a game off them.
Yeah, I think the key thing is they're kind of like the opposite of OG, where OG plays lanes and looks forward. Secret plays lanes and looks kind of backwards, where they're kind of working out how we're securing our own farm before we make that forward play. And if you look at OG, who's probably the only rival now in the group that I think could maybe muscle up into Secret, is a team that plays out their lanes and then actively looks to try and take an engagement or break down kind of the slope nature of the game. But yeah, I think that's going to be my favorite series. I think Secret OG, they're the only team I see left who could actually beat Secret. Like I just don't see anyone else who has kind of a deep enough playbook to surprise Secret, and Secret isn't surprised by anything. Like Secret have to play Alliance as well coming up in the following weeks, and Alliance are a little bit too kind of samey, you know, like they play very well on the heroes they have, but that doesn't help you beat a team like Secret.
Let's have a brief look at Team Liquid then. We already mentioned their series against Team Secret, but against Tundra they also lost as well, which I think we mentioned last week, or I mentioned with SSA Spartan last week, that it was a must-win series for them to kind of cement their place in the standings. What ended up happening to them in that series?
I think they just didn't... I don't want to use the term respect, because they clearly did respect the Coddle, but I think Tundra just demonstrated how good Keeper Light was, and they expertly kind of utilized the recall, the global presence, and they just played really well. I think Tundra they're kind of like the dark horse of the group, where you expect them to do well, but not like top 4 well. You know, they're like a strong 5th, 6th. They're probably not getting eliminated, but that's about it. And in that series, they ramped up the aggression so much that they could have beaten any team that day. It feels like they just had such an amazing draft, and just the idea behind it. Like they had an off lane in one game to try and deal with a Batrider. In the first game, they just had a Grimstroke mid who dumpstered the Death Prophet. Like it was just so refreshing to see Tundra just have these. It wasn't like new ideas, but it's just the pace in which they executed those ideas was second to none. And I think they are for sure a contender at now top 4. I think after that series. They only have to play, like, I say only, they have to play Nigma, Alliance, and Viking, right? So it is doable. I think Nigma has looked shaky. Alliance is on the rise, and Viking is kind of like, depends what day it is. One day they can look like top 4 worthy. The next day they are barely surviving. But I think Viking will be a big kind of comeback story. But I think Tundra, they should reliably get at least another 2 wins in the group stage, and should end around about like 4 and 3. I think that's probably my predicted placement for them.
Who have been their key players then? Because I remember before in the earlier tournaments we had in October last year, Skitter looked very rough at times. Has he begun to cement his promise a little bit?
Yeah, I think the change of position 4 has allowed more kind of light to be shone on the carry. I think Biver's a little bit more sacrificial in his gameplay, and it allows Skitter to have these bigger moments. Normally, in before with Mud Golems or Tundra, when they had Milan took up a bit more space, and like there was a lot more plays from him, and that kind of put Skitter in the kind of the shadows, especially when you had Boromir as well, who was popping off. It's hard to like praise everyone on the team, but I think the series that Tundra played this week, it was like the Skitter show. I think one of them was the Wraith King game where he expertly bought a rapier rather than any other items. Suddenly outside Roshan secures that. He was the star of Tundra this week, and I'd love to see if he can continue riding that momentum. But again, I guess my only concern for them is they're always a team that has 2 or 3 strategies that are very good, just like Alliance. But once they're discovered against these like tier 1 teams, it's hard to draft these strategies with confidence because suddenly new ideas are coming into play and new counters are occurring. So right now, very good. It surprised Liquid. I just want to know if they have kind of like a little bit of science to throw into that to allow them to kind of continue having that surprise factor each week. Otherwise, they could easily just stumble into being very good, but not good enough to really kind of excel, I guess.
Let's close up the matches by talking about Viking GG, who you mentioned of beginning to turn the corner. A 2-1 victory against Team Enigma is obviously pretty impressive. What did we learn from that series?
They're not afraid to pick new heroes. I think after the first 2 weeks, they were way too aligned to kind of pub meta rather than team meta. So they came with a refreshing outlook on the game, and it was very nice to see. They executed team fights, at tier 1 level. I think they kept trying to play this lifestealer hero. In one game, it worked really well because the hero fundamentally is like a damage soak and like a vision giver, but you need that something else to really give you that kind of team fight presence. And they had the Oracle Leshrac. Celery played amazingly on that Oracle to enable the Leshrac, and that combination swept Enigma aside eventually. They tried the Lifestealer again. It didn't really work out because, like I said, with other teams, a strategy can work, but when you force the strategy that hard and you don't have kind of variation to it, teams easily figure out across a series. So Enigma walked that Lifestealer, put it aside. Game 3, though, Viking put an offlane Razor, started applying a lot of pressure on the map, and they looked like the Viking that we saw last year, and it was just like a dominant force to be reckoned with. Again, I only have some queries because Shaker was present in all 3 games, and I think Shaker is a very broken hero. I think teams will soon learn to probably ban that against Viking, forcing a bit more of a aggressive offlane compared to the more passive offlane that we get to see, which enables these kind of quirkier offlane picks. But again, Viking, they won. Happy to see them win. I was very worried they would just go out straight away because they weren't looking that good. They need to still overcome the likes of Liquid and Enigma and Tundra and Alliance and these type of teams to even survive because they're not playing for top 4 anymore. No. Maybe they are, but I don't think they have that room to really push it. They are only 1 and 2 though. They have played the least amount of games out of any team. So there is kind of the scope for them to suddenly walk and beat OG, Alliance, Tundra, and Heikos. Like, it isn't a unrealistic path to get into the major, but I feel like they probably will fall short to OG and Alliance, which then puts them in an awkward position of just surviving rather than major. But after your start, I don't think Viking fans could ever expect them to get to the major because when you lose the first 2 series of the week, like the DPC group, that doesn't put you in a exactly, especially with Europe. Top 4 of Europe is basically top 8 of the world. So
there you go. Let's chat a little bit about the Europe meta because we're now close to the halfway point. I don't know how much you've been able to catch the other regions. Are there things that are feeling uniquely European at this point that aren't present in the other regions?
I guess Bloodseeker's pretty high up there, but that was more like a week 1-2 hero, and it's kind of falling off going into the later stages. I think that was mainly because of Enigma kind of pushing it into the region. I guess Shaker, of course, is a very European hero now. China did dabble with it a little bit, but Europe's trying to claim it as their own quickly.
I think everyone's picking it now, though.
Yeah, I think everyone. I think the only regions that haven't actually really picked it up properly is NA and SA. They're the only regions that are a lot slower to pick up on like the global meta. They're very much kind of in their own little bubble of heroes. I guess you could show some reference towards like Nyx Coddle. They're still very prominent, but there isn't really a standout kind of this is suddenly a European thing. I'm trying to think.
It's
I
hard
haven't
'cause
really-
Europe's the
yeah.
default meta in a way.
No, exactly. Yeah, like I think it's Europe and China are like the real kind of leaders of meta. So, yeah, no, I guess that it's just kind of the standard heroes. Like I'm looking through the list, and there's I guess Lifestealer as well for Europe, and it's dabbled a little bit with CIS. That's kind of been like the recent hero, and Medusa in other regions has really kind of started popping off, especially in NA with Arteezy. But I wouldn't be surprised if that trickled over. Yeah.
Just to hear. Let's close up then by looking at the schedule for next week. We've got a barnstorming collection of games on February the 9th. We've got Nigma versus OG, Alliance versus Team Tundra. February the 10th, we've got Viking GG versus High Coast Esports. February 13th, we've got OG versus Viking GG and Secret versus Team Alliance. What would be your pick from those games?
It's probably going to be the one that no one expects, but Viking and High Coast, I think for Viking, they're going to expect to walk that series and to continue their kind of expectation of the miracle run to get into the top 4. But for High Coast, they've been knocked down so many times. Now Norton fought, like, if they don't win this series, they're already out pretty much. Like it's that bad. So I feel like there's a lot of fire underneath High Coast to get good. And they've had a very long time now. I think it's like an 8-day break between their last series and this series. So I want this series to go 3 games, and I'd love to see High Coast win just to get a bit more of a story going into the later weeks. But yeah, Viking are the favorites for that one. But I guess other than that series, which is mainly like the battle of like the losers, I think probably OG Nigma is probably going to be the next one there, because OG sitting at 2-1. If they're even looking at trying to rival a first place, they're going to have to start winning games now. And yeah, I think Nigma, they're looking shaky. They've already lost 2 series. There's potential that they could also somehow get eliminated as well with a 2-2 score. Like it sounds funny, but like if they lose everything, they're out. So yeah, I think OG, that's going to be a very good series.
Okay, we'll look forward to those then. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you to T Governor for taking us through Europe. Of course, you can watch T Governor in the Dream League and ESL streams, covering both those regions, Europe and CIS. He's been great so far, and I'm delighted to see him on our screens. Always a pleasure to talk to him as well. But we are going to be talking to our final guest of the evening/day, who is Neff, who is going to be taking us through North America. Okay, so just to kick off, talk me through this week in NA. What was the top series for you?
Top series we got to talk about last week, the EG versus Undying. But week number 3 ended up being about as eventful as week number 2, unfortunately.
It was a very it's a week with 5 2-0s. I think let's go into that EG Undying series immediately, because I did watch that. I thought it was a pretty good series. I don't think Undying looked bad. They looked like they could have maybe won it. What was your feeling about that series?
Both teams did a lot of the same thing. They fell back on the Slark and the OD on Team Undying, and they fell back on Medusa on Evil Geniuses. It felt to me like Undying didn't get a chance to practice their draft enough. They didn't right away throw it out and say, we need to do something different. This didn't work. They thought they needed to refine it a little bit. I actually got the chance to talk to Undying's manager, and one of the reasons why I feel they did lose is apparently they had to cancel 4 scrims that week. So Undying, unfortunately, not being in as good a shape as they could have been against Evil Geniuses for that match, which is a bit disappointing, but Evil Geniuses ended up being the better team that day.
It felt to me like they just drafted themselves into a Medusa wall. They did no way of dealing with that Medusa at all. With a Ricky and a Slark, both games, it felt rough for them, I thought.
Yeah, it did. The Slark a lot of the time will do enough damage to burst heroes down, but against a wall like Medusa, you're not going to kill somebody in just one trick to the trade. So you're banking on getting late enough into the game that he's got the reduced cooldown talent. But that game, they were just too good on EG, ended up pushing up their high ground. And each game, I think 35 minutes for both ones. They knew exactly what their timing was on EG and took advantage of it. 35 minutes, 15 seconds, game number 1. 35 minutes, 47 seconds in game number 2.
That's Undying as a team. They're a team that we've been kind of excited about. They went into this series 3-0. Do you feel you now have a better understanding of where they are as a team?
A little bit. I think I underestimated Evil Geniuses a little bit as well. I thought Quincy Crew would end up being significantly stronger than Evil Geniuses. Now it's not looking like that's the case. If they can take such a convincing 2-0 series against Undying, then EG might just be a stronger team than Quincy Crew, which is shocking to me.
Undying have got kind of they've played the three easiest teams in the group stage. Well, the whole DPC in black and yellow, 5-man minus an A team. They've now only got difficult games to play. Who do you see them as being stronger than? Do you think they'll easily go past Sad Boys and Four Zoomers, or are they going to struggle there as well?
I think they'll get past Sad Boys. Four Zoomers is going to be a bit of a question mark. You get to see the Undying versus Sad Boys game pretty soon as well. It's going to be on February 11th, right after A-Team versus Black and Yellow. PPD mentioned himself when he was a guest broadcaster that he was a little bit worried about Team Undying, and he thought that they might have been a little bit stronger than his team. We'll see if that's still the case after they've had a little bit more time to practice and prep, though.
Mm-hmm. And the EG, let's go into EG. They're obviously the poster boys of the region for many people. In that match, you'd mentioned before that you weren't entirely convinced yet by what had been being picked for Ice Ice Ice. And,
I changed my mind with the Nature's Prophet. I gotta say, he played a hell of a game, definitely the MVP, and it showed. His Undying, they wanted nothing to do with Ice 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 and the Nature's Prophet, banned that out in game number 2, but still didn't end up making the difference. The guy is an incredibly strong player, and showing North America just how scary he is recently with his debut.
Yeah, and was Abed just as good as always? Is it REG a team of 5 kind of superstars with strengths coming from every position, or are there particular areas where you think they're stronger than others?
I think it really shows that they've got 5 superstar players. When they were playing a couple months ago and they had Bulba standing in, you could see the weaknesses, and the team wasn't really used to it. They didn't do so good with their coach standing in. Now that they've got no weak points, a lot like how we talk about Quincy Crew. They look incredibly strong. Abed is killing it. They've got Ice 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 doing an amazing job in the off lane. Again, such a talented player. He's pretty versatile with what you can put him on, what heroes for that matter. And I think they've kind of embraced that on EG.
It's good to hear. Let's move into Four Zoomers versus Black and Yellow, which that would be my probably second series of the week in terms of pickups. Again, not an incredibly double-sided series. I felt like Four Zoomers won that pretty easily. Did you feel we learned anything about them from there?
No, that in my opinion was to be expected. Black and Yellow did a decent job standing up to them at times, but they ultimately crumbled against Four Zoomers, who just showed both games to be the stronger team. I know that one was your second favorite, but I wanted to touch briefly on my second favorite series of last week, which of course was the top 2 lower division teams, the Cut versus Simply 2-based.
Mm-hmm.
That one ended up being a slightly quicker series of 2-0. Simply 2-based, of course, Boris, I Annihilate, Monkeys Forever, Z-Freak, and Empyrean against the Cut, Scourge, McDuck, Little Nick, Triangle King, Vol, and Pingu. Simply 2-based still undefeated at 5-0 at the moment. Mm-hmm. So looking incredibly strong. They ended up running a position 1 silencer in one of their games. With no real hard carry to play alongside that one. So it was pretty cool. Their lineup was the Silencer, Tidehunter, Clockwork, Puck, and Keeper of the Light, which is pretty interesting. Not something you were expecting, I'm sure.
No.
Or a lot of people watching were expecting. God, and they're playing that against the lineup on the other side? A more traditional lineup. I have to pull this one up to remember. Yeah, Medusa, Timbersaw, Shadow Shaman, Void Spirit, and Enchantress. So they just ended up out damaging everybody on that silencer. Just went Midas first and stomped the games. We've seen a lot of silencer this week.
Mm. Do you think when Simply 2-based, because they are going to be moving into the upper division, I don't think there's much doubt on that. Do you think they're going to be a team that are competitive in the upper division next season, or are they? Is it so hard to prove in the lower division of NA?
It's hard to prove. I think that no other team is really close to their level inside the lower division right now. That match against the Cut has proved that. I'd rate them somewhere in the middle of the upper division in North America. It's a little bit of a surprise they didn't end up qualifying there to begin with. But I'm excited to see how they'd perform against teams like Sad Boys, how they'd perform against teams like Undying now. I think they'd be a little bit stronger than 5-man Midas or A-Team. Black and Yellow might just be their equal, though.
It's good to hear. Okay, let's move into a little bit. We're halfway through the DPC at the moment, so we're getting more of a sense, I think, of the metas of every single region, how they're beginning to differ. Do you think NA is a radically different region to every other region? Are there things that they're doing that are uniquely NA, for example?
I wouldn't say uniquely NA. Silencer has started to come out a little bit, but he has in a couple other regions as well. There's the Spirit Heroes, which are super valued across every region, but in North America, it feels like if you can't master them, your team just isn't going to cut it. That's an issue I've seen with some of the lower division people. They've tended to fall back on heroes that are their specialties instead of anything that is strong inside the meta. It's costing them, it seems. As far as super special out of North America, I wouldn't say that. Maybe things like Venomancer, Arkosh seems to run some, I guess, split pushing more than, or a little bit better than a lot of other regions. Nature's Prophet seems to be valued quite a bit in this region as well. OD doesn't get as banned out as often in other regions as it does in North America, though, which is a bit surprising to me.
Do you expect we'll see changes in the NA meta upcoming? Because other people are mentioning that NA tends to be a little bit behind other regions and that they pick up new trends slightly slower. Things like the Earthshaker has not yet been picked up so holistically by NA as it has been by every other region. Are we expecting those changes to slowly filter through for NA, or do you think NA will always be slightly unique?
I think NA will be slightly unique. We've started to see a little bit of the Earthshaker come out. The last 4 games inside the upper division, 4 Zoomers and Evil Geniuses both ran Earthshaker every single game.
Oh, right. Okay.
This last week. Yeah. So it's become a little bit more popular now. That shard really fixing some of the problems that the hero had. So powerful at the moment.
It's nuts, yeah. Let's move on to what we can expect next week. We have hopefully a slightly bigger week next week for NA. We've got 4 Zoomers versus 5-man Midas on February the 9th. On February 11th, we've got Black and Yellow versus A-Team, Sad Boys versus Team Undying. And on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, we've got EG versus A-Team and Quincy Crew versus Black and Yellow. I guess there's no huge matches there, but I think Sad Boys versus Team Undying would be an interesting pick. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight?
I suppose Black and Yellow against the A-Team. I'd say I'd favor Black and Yellow a little bit over that one, but it should be a fairly close matchup. I'm not sure who's going to win that. The rest of the matches this upcoming week, I don't think will be super exciting. It's week 5 and 6 that you got to look forward to. I think a lot of the stronger teams will start to face off these last 2 weeks. Quincy Crew has to play against a lot of stronger teams. Quincy Crew has to play against a lot of stronger teams in these last 2 weeks here. They've had a lot of time to practice. So far, it's just 4 Zoomers that they played against in a convincing 2-0. So right now, Quincy Crew, I think the only team out of at least North America to not drop any games. I don't know how it goes the rest of the regions where they stand.
Quite anybody other than haven't dropped any games, and Secret have dropped a game. Beast Coast haven't dropped a game either.
Interesting. So I think each region's got its own undefeated team right now. Quincy Crew, they're going to have their work cut out for them in the next couple of games. So something to look forward to in week 5 and 6 for everybody.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that then. I'll let you go. So thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. And that's a wrap. So thanks everyone for listening, and thanks to all 6 of my analysts. That is Kips, who can be followed at Kipsol. Danog can be followed at Danog on Twitter. T Governor, who can be followed at T Governor. 1437, who can be followed at 1437X. Neth, who can be followed at Neth Sensei at Twitter. And finally, MoFaradota at MoFaradota. So thanks, guys, for all of your support and help this week. With those last 3, we had to rearrange them on pretty quick timing. So thanks to all 3 of those analysts for helping me get those done across the evening to get this out on Tuesday so we can have an episode this week. And thanks to all of you for your patience and also for listening this far. I really appreciate everyone who's listened to this podcast and said such nice things about it. Before we close up, I want to mention the Brazilian Dota player 444 who passed away sadly from COVID-19 this week. Was a great guy from everything I heard about him, and it's a big tragedy when anyone from the scene dies. And even though he wasn't playing in the DPC this year, he was a player with great potential, and really real tragedy to see him pass away. So my condolences go out to his family and friends, and I hope that everyone is doing okay. We, however, are going to be closing up this week. Again, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I can be found at Danieloffen, and that's spelled Daniel, then OFFEN. Again, if you want to financially support me for creating the show, you can find links to my Patreon in the episode description. I do appreciate whatever support I get there. Position 6 is going to be releasing again this week with Frankie Ward. I know she's not particularly a Dota personality, but she's doing little bits in Dota. I'm a big fan of hers, so excited to get her on. So check that out on Thursday. But until then, though, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.